My name is Howard Coombs. I have the privilege of being the Associate Director, Defense Outreach or Defense Engagement, depending on who you are, at the Center for International Defense Policy. And I'm going to take a few moments to introduce our speaker for today, Bob Martyn. Now, Bob and I go back a couple of years. And so I had this long soliloquy about all the misfortunes that we have done together and he has done by himself, his adventures that I'm aware of and the ones that people have told me about. However, he has kept me to a fairly short script. So Bob is a former member of the Canadian military, and he has a diverse background. As he's fond of saying, he has never been able to hold a job. He has been an armor crewman, a search and rescue technician, an intelligence officer, as well as a reserve infantry officer. His search and rescue time included extensive Arctic experience, as his squadron had the responsibility of the whole Arctic region. He has also been involved in operational deployments to Cyprus with the UN, Bosnia with NATO, Kosovo with NATO, and Afghanistan with Special Operations Command. He left the military to become a Reserve Infantry Officer. His education includes a BA in politics, an MA in war studies, and a PhD from here at Queen's in military history. And I might, as an aside, add that we share the same supervisor. So that's it, which is even closer to family relationships these days. His academic career includes postdoctoral research in terrorism and intelligence. So could I ask you to join me in welcoming Bob Martyn to our speaker today.
Sounds like a pretty impressive guy. If I had a sister, I'd be okay with her hooking up with him. Yeah, all that not being able to hold a job, my mess kit was lovely with all the different Boy Scout badges. So anyway, this presentation started life as a 3-hour course, and I thought I had deleted enough slides, but Brian tells me there's still a lot that I'm gonna have to skim through, or else you have to read very quickly. We have a lot of coastline. A lot of it's up in the Arctic. Well, the Arctic was a very stable place for the longest time over the last few decades. We're being driven back into Cold War mentality between some political leaders on several continents with a lot of interest in the Arctic or the Canadian Arctic, although not everyone agrees that this portion belongs to us. I found from living up there that it's more of an idea than a place. The Arctic doesn't mean winter, it means isolation. Even CSIS has taken an interest in the Arctic, which is somewhat new due to some legislation that changed, allowing them to spend more time looking at the Arctic for threats up there. The one change to the Arctic Council has been the elimination of Russia after their Ukraine invasion. Also the fact that Sweden and Finland are now part of NATO. Russia is facing a NATO Arctic Council. Canada has very little intelligence culture. And I say this as a former intelligence officer who, for my sins, ended up in NDHQ twice. It's just something that politicians don't think they need quite often. We tend to be briefing ourselves at the Privy Council office. The other people that are involved there, CSIS, CSE, and the politicians go, just tell me what I need to know. Well, you need to know this. Yeah, I'm not interested in that. So within the security, so the interests tend to be enemy, weather, and terrain, predominantly Army. And for this, I'm using adversary rather than enemy. And I'll be lumping weather and terrain in together because they're interrelated in the Arctic. Starting with the intelligence cycle. Canada and most of NATO has a 4-step intelligence cycle. The Americans are up to 6 steps because their processing is divided into several smaller steps. And the analyst is at the center of all of those, because even though the commander provides direction, or the politicians, whatever, still the analyst can come back and say, but what about this? Maybe they hadn't thought about that because the analyst tends to develop some sort of expertise in a particular field. Like for the longest time, I did strategic intelligence looking at the Soviets during the Cold War. And so you get some Air Force helicopter pilot general and say, well, I just need to know about landing zones. Well, no, you do need to know a bit more than that because of strategic influences. And of course, Greenland became a topic. And again, it's not just a federal issue. There's several layers of government that all have to care about the Arctic and be involved with the decision-making, the collection, the analysis. I just had to use that picture of the polar bear doing collection. Right now, the Canadian Coast Guard is one of the lead agencies for collecting information in the Arctic. In the past year, the Coast Guard and Transport Canada was moved, or the aviation part of Transport Canada was moved over to National Defence. I thought, that's good. We're eliminating some stovepipes by all being on the same team. Till I was told that that's in the hopes that Canada can make its NATO spending things by including their budgets in with ours. So lately, the automated identification system has been tied into a bunch of Inuit communities where they also have eyes on. It's not just the rangers, but having these people familiar with the area reporting in and saying, we hadn't seen these ships before. They get paid back because a lot of times there's cruise ships up there, and the first village they come to, they buy up all the stuff and no one else along the chain gets there. So they're happy to say, no, there's other villages down here. Please support their local industries as well for tourism. And lately we've had, because ethnically they're the same, Canadian Inuit and Greenland Inuit up north, because it looks like they migrated to Greenland from what is Canada now. And so they speak the same language, and they've been increasingly talking to each other on intelligence surveillance matters. So progress. That last paragraph is a recurring theme. Things are going to reach their expiry date before we replace them. And I'll come back to it, but the satellites are important for communications, but also for any uncrewed vehicles we have up there, drones, because they require satellites to pass information back as well as to get flight information to them. And if they're going to be falling out of the sky, which literally is going to be happening because of global warming, they get into the atmosphere and they burn up and crash. Canada is supposedly getting Reapers from the Americans. These are not optimized for the Arctic, but everyone's trying to jury-rig them so they're more amenable to flying in the Arctic. Now, Transport Canada has a surveillance fleet of Dash 8s. Only one is dedicated to the Arctic. And we're going into business with the Aussies for over-the-horizon radar, which is going to be located along the Trent-Severn waterway. Guess people don't want to live up there. They just want to stay down here and have the radar waves coming off the ionosphere so they can stay where it's warm. Okay, we started with the distant early warning line back in the 50s. That's 1950s. Most of them were shortly obsolete. Some of them were cannibalized to make the North Warning System, which is also now pretty much obsolete. And again, the whole concept of tracking Russian bombers coming across the north was a non-starter shortly after they were built. And these hypersonic missiles, Russia is working on a nuclear-powered one that can loiter for a year. Of course, Russia's economy is not in great shape either, so I'll believe it when I see it if it's successful. We're on board the E3 Sentry. We have 2 Canadians that I know of on exchange up in Elmendorf, flying on the US Air Force AWACS up there. One of Trump's spiels this morning, although we're not talking politics, was to not recognize the Bombardier global platform in the States, just because we're not recognizing some of the Gulf Stream things he wants recognized to sell up in Canada. So, okay, weather and terrain. There's two Arctic passages. We have the Northwest Passage, and the Russians have their Northern Sea Route. Last summer, a Chinese ship went through the Northern Sea Route. It took 20 days, when normally it takes 40 to 60 days, depending on the more southerly route to get from Asia to Europe. So they're happy with that. High Arctic haulers. It's a CBC series about these guys out of Quebec City that they provide cargo ships because they only have about 2 months to resupply Arctic places. And in the picture, you can see a barge and there's two tugs. That's the first thing they offload because they have to ship across the shoreline because most of these places don't have jetties that are suitable for this. And it's interesting series. Things they have to deal with up there. Yeah, the group that does shipping is the Deganye group. So that's one of their ships that they have to deal with. Extreme tides. Katabatic winds that blow across Greenland and down into the valleys, the lowland at water level. And a model that no one saw coming is the glaciers come off of Greenland and they get blown into these two choke points. Make it even more difficult for shipping to get in there during the summer months. Sometimes even during the summer, ice can be an issue. There was a cargo ship that went aground last September and we couldn't get it refloated until October, just because it was so blocked in by ice on the shoreline. Fewer than 10% of Canadian waters are charted to contemporary standards. Rare earth minerals. This is one of the things that a lot of countries are interested in because the Arctic has a significant amount. And the issue is it's tough to dig up economically just because of where they're located. A lot of them, like zinc and ores used for magnets, cell phones, are up in the Arctic. So technology that's growing, increasing demand. Gray zone conflict. Russia's been using the Baltic as a training ground for GPS spoofing, hacking, all those along the Nordic countries up there. Increasingly, airliners have had to do training on what happens when you lose your GPS because it's a recurring theme in certain areas. Typical of CSE, this is very wordy. And we're increasingly seeing AI being used, particularly to target politicians and government organizations. As you can see, our undersea cables are limited to northern Quebec as far as the Arctic goes. The rest are just the coastal links. And quite often, these have been torn out by ships dragging anchors. Like, I'm not a sailor. My parents were married, but I can't imagine sailing a ship and not knowing that you're dragging an anchor. I did do 35 training days with the Navy, though. So dive and dive supervisor courses, that was enough. Part of the problem is not so much the climate change, but the communications links for emergency services are being problematic. Actually, that second paragraph should be climate disinformation, not misinformation, because it's intentional. The Russians are doing it on purpose, and the Chinese. Misinformation is when someone says the wrong thing and shit happens. So, specific adversaries. Russian doctrine has recently been upgraded because the Arctic used to be number 3 on their list of things they cared about. Now it's number 2. So the Arctic is moving up in their concern. China is more than happy to support Russia because this adds to their claim that they're a near Arctic country, whatever that means. This is all well and good, except it's not true. It's just more Russian disinformation, like trying to break up NATO, saying, now see that Denmark is abandoning Ukraine, which they're not. They're still supporting. Again, as mentioned earlier, CSIS is getting more involved with the Arctic due to Article 19 of the CSIS Act. I don't like the term drones, but I accept that so many people are using them because both my tours in Afghanistan, I was using Predators and Reapers, and it's okay, call them drones if you will. The drone attacks from Ukraine through drones smuggled in on cargo thing on transport trucks driven by Russian bombers. They didn't know they were there, and then launched all these swarm attacks, which I'm going to come back to momentarily. No, I'm going to come back to it right now. If they can launch from a truck driving Russia, why can't they be launched from sea containers? Yeah, more Ukrainian casualties were caused by drones in the last 2 years than tanks, artillery, rockets. Again, their government's claiming 2028, but again, they're not optimized for the Arctic, but we'll jury rig them somehow. China has their own, about a 27-foot wingspan, can loiter up to 12 hours. They claim it's designed for diverse civil missions, such as launching 100 other miniature drones. Reading between lines on that, I think China believes they've already done enough in the 9-dash area in the South China Sea that we're okay with that as is right now. So they're expanding outwards in other directions and just leaving the Philippines and the rest alone for now. A lot of China's activity in Canada is targeting Chinese citizens who are here going to school, business, and they're saying, if you want to come back, you got to do our bidding. That's again part of a CSIS report. Back in 1999, this Chinese research ship, the Snow Dragon, pulled into Tuktoyaktuk for fuel. We didn't know it was there. Caused a bit of a security headache for several people. So its follow-on ship, Zulong 2, came up in 2024, again in 2025, but this time it had an escort. And of course, they're saying it's international waters, we're just doing scientific research. And you're also charting the waters. More of that in a second. Earlier this year, beginning of January, this submersible was charting that ridge off of Greenland. It had previously been seen between Canada and Greenland. Now, I don't know why they'd be charting the seabed there unless they were planning on running submarines through there. I just included this one because of talk of 51st state, buying Greenland. I have many friends, including family, that are American. So my one son, bless him, he's stuck living as a stay-at-home dad in Hawaii because his wife has a great job there. The 11th Airborne Divisions are the one that are on standby to go to Minnesota, but they don't have enough heartache in Alaska right now. This is primarily the Prime Minister talking at Davos and expressing an interest in the Arctic, which some other prime ministers have not. Stephen Harper said we're going to build this naval facility in Nanisivik, which has proven to be abysmal. They don't know if the jetty can ever be finished because it's so corroded and destroyed. It's been under construction for 20 years and it's already 10 years after its due date. So, okay, some suggestions. The intelligence cycle needs to be changed because it's not keeping up with technology. There's just too much information coming too fast for it to be absorbed, for the analysts to actually understand everything that's happening and pass that on. And while I said Canada does not really have an intelligence culture because a lot of the tribal elders aren't really interested in it, when they are, they want the answer now. So if it's not something that's being looked at by the intelligence system, it may take a little bit longer. And the military in particular loves its silos. When ships are emitting their position, location, ID through that MDA system, it works well. But not all ships are required to do that. So we have a tough time keeping a track on what's happening in our water. And I don't know if any of you were at the conference last November. I said, there will be a Navy in Canada's Arctic. The question is, will it be ours? And again, we need to get on this replacing equipment that's aging before it's currently scheduled to be replaced. Icebreakers and patrol aircraft aging out. Again, greater investment in drones. This was from a paper I stole from CIDP. Claire and Andrew. And I believe that's it. Questions, comments?
All right, everyone, we have time for questions. Bob threatened to go to 1300, but we do have 25 minutes. So for our online audience, if you wish to ask questions, you can post them in the chat. And I see one here in the audience already.
Bob, thanks very much for this really depressing overview of the Arctic. I'll sleep well tonight.
You're an engineer.
For you and any of the connections you have in federal government departments or the military, and for anybody else who's plugged in like that, I don't know if it still happens, but it used to be the commander of Northern Region, which is probably called some other division name right now. I don't know. North of 40, what's that called? 25th Division or something like that? Well, no, that's the old name. I think it's a division name now, but whatever. Whoever controls that in the Canadian military used to sponsor an all departments whole of government conference once a year. It rotated between the 3 different capitals of the Northern Territories. Every person to a person that came said, wow. Most of them came from Ottawa, but they were also members from each of the departments present in the North, and say, I wish we could collaborate this well when we were back home in Ottawa, because for 3 days, people would actually have really good talks. Okay, that's the end of my my mention. My question is this: the Arctic Council. We've dropped Russia. I don't know when that happened. I can understand why.
2022.
22.
Yep.
So I've forgotten, what is the mandate of the Arctic Council, and how does excluding them help us pursue that mandate if we're not talking to them much anymore?
Well, their mandate is primarily oversight, looking for pollution, looking for hazards to navigation, and basically trying to collaborate, and so we're all on the same page. I believe there is still some offline chat with some Russians. I would hope so, but again, we just can't let them be seen to have any opinions. And again, the stuff where I believe they are talking with the Russians are predominantly involved with pollution and radioactive waste along their shoreline. So, because currents take that different places. But I think Russia is more concerned with getting Chinese funding to rebuild their stuff in the Arctic. Because again, China wants to be Arctic Silk Road and trying to get people to believe that they're a near Arctic country somehow.
It's not for us, it's for all the online.
Yes, there you go. Leap over the table.
In a single bound.
The Department of National Defense is awakening from a long, decades-long slumber, one hopes, as a result of the showering of billions and billions of dollars of money, which is good. If you had your druthers and a clear blue sky, what equipment specifically fulfilling what functions would you say we require in the Arctic? land, sea, and air?
Well, I would, from my background, if I had clear blue skies, I'd probably be jumping out of the airplane. That's different life. I think we need to put more into ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, because we don't know what is up there as well as we should. So we need to have more persistent tracking of things that are passing through there. And again, it's land, sea, and air. But we just don't have, there's still too many gaps. And some of the gaps, like I mentioned, like ships broadcast their position stuff if they feel like it. Some of the large ones, it's mandatory. But the mid-size and smaller, they said, no, I don't want to pay for that equipment. So if you happen to see me, wave, but they're just not bothering. We're not tracking it as well as we should. If we're going to be claiming it, because again, several countries are saying, that's not the Canadian Arctic, it's international waters. And the two biggest ones are the US and China. So
Any other equipment?
As part of it, it has to be suitable for the Arctic. So it's not just reapers, predators, and like. We need more satellites to cover the gaps. And they have to be replaced more frequently. As far as actual warfighting stuff, I'm a big fan of Mother Nature. I mean, the Finnish Winter War did work well for them against the Russians, but. Yes, but the problem is, again, where the glacial ice was stacking up, quite often it goes down to the seabed and tears all that stuff out. And again, this is just a trivial thing for you in case someone asks you on some game show. Glacial ice and just normal seashore ice smell differently. Glacial ice has a crisper scent. And it's like if you're a cook and you can find the words to describe umami flavor, but unless you actually taste it, you don't really know what it is. So it's the same with the smell of Arctic ice. If you smell it, you get some old Arctic hand saying, that's glacial ice. Oh, now I know. And so far it's never come up in conversation, but someday Alex Trebek will get a hold of it.
All right, I've got a couple of online questions and I'm going to go to Kevin. So first online question is from Colonel retired Ryan Jorkowski, who's currently doing war studies PhD at RMC. Accepting the complexity of the region as you've laid out and the equipment limitations as Arctic geopolitics shifts from cooperation to strategic competition, what are your thoughts on how Canadian intelligence institutions can adapt to detect and interpret gray zone activities that fall below traditional military thresholds, but challenge sovereignty and influence?
Good question, Colonel. I'm not sure if I would rely overly much on the military. I would leave that to Arctic intelligence organizations. CSIS is buying into it now, CSE, especially things like cyber threats. CSE's looking at that quite well, but I'm not sure with all the money that's being showered on DND that we really have. I don't think there's a champion to argue that point right now for the Canadian military to get more involved in the Arctic than they already are. It's a very slight handful of people who are posted in those areas that have a vested interest, but so much of Ottawa, again, for my sins, I was in NDHQ twice, and if it's not on your table, there's no interest. And is it 2:30 on Friday? I'm out.
All right, we'll do one more online question, then we'll switch to Kevin. Good afternoon, and thank you for your presentation. Much talk has been made of whole of government operations in the Arctic with the intent of increasing domain awareness. As far as I can tell, outside of a handful of sporadic exercises and the operation of 3 MSOCs, there are few concrete actions on the ground, in the air, or on the waves. Are you able to speak to that at all? Cheers. And from Sub-Lieutenant Liam Brown, who's a graduate student in politics and one of our graduate interns.
Okay. I agree wholeheartedly with whole of government. It has to be more than just buzzwords, though. We have to get people from the various departments to physically and financially buy in. And because everyone brings something different to the table, and it's when you get, so that if we could have this sort of gathering more often where we're actually exchanging this information, yes, it'd be brilliant. But especially, my issue with the military is someone is posted in for 3 years and they're an expert, then they're gone. And some of them manage to keep track or use that information, but quite often, okay, I've moved on to another task now. This is what I care about. And so we lose that. And there's some jobs that I would not want to go back into. So I can understand trying to escape, but others, we need to keep that corporate memory somehow.
You use the term adversary in your presentation, and there's another word that's maybe not as dramatic, rival.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. Do you see Denmark as an adversary or a rival in the Canadian Arctic?
I see them as an ally. I think we're on the same team. I think, you know, here we are talking politics again. Trump has succeeded in uniting people, mostly against him, but they're saying, no, we need to all be on the same team here. And threatening a NATO ally saying, I will either invade or buy your country. That's.
But there has been friction between the two. What would you call that operation that's below the threshold of armed conflict?
Gray zone conflict.
Yeah, they've engaged in gray zone conflict with us.
Well, they have, but we managed to sort out Han Island and stop giving away schnapps versus rye and changing the flags. That's one of the most peaceful wars I've ever seen.
Bob, you mentioned one of your priorities, if we were going to fix the problem up north, would be better ISR. And yet earlier in your presentation, you identified that our satellites are going to crash around 2026 and we aren't going to replace them until 32. So what's that, a 6-year blind spot. So no satellite coverage over the Arctic region unless we buy it. We'll probably have to buy it from our two favorite friends, the Americans, who sometimes are good friends, and the Russians, who won't be. So what other options are there? Why would we allow such a strategic gap to create itself?
There's because of a lack of focus from people who should be officially caring. And I would point fingers at Space Command. Like, we still have people in the satellite business in NDHQ that should have been bringing this to attention.
They're hard to work with.
Well, and again, it's the climate modeling didn't see that effect of the global warming as strongly as it is, that the fact that they're burning up and crashing sooner than forecast. So
From online, there has been discussion about building ice-capable landing ships to deploy to the Arctic without ports or infrastructure. Do you see that as a must-do for us to have capability to react in the Arctic? And that is from Nick Werstiak.
I think it's a high priority, but it's not a must-do at this point. Because right now, we could take lessons from that shipping crew out of Quebec City that do the grocery thing. Like, they go up there with their cargo ships and unload fire trucks, and this family ordered a pickup truck, so that gets offloaded on the beach and stuff. And that's their groceries for a year. So they go over across the shore. But anytime you want to build a new class of ship, the Navy goes, where are the sailors coming from? And the training and the infrastructure. And fair enough. We keep hearing about these bushel baskets of money coming to DND, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of it.
It takes decades to spool it up.
Yeah. Well, especially new acquisitions of new types of ships, and sure.
So I released from the Army 13 years ago, but at the time the Navy was talking about acquiring billions of dollars worth of AOPS, Arctic offshore patrol vessels or ships. They were, I think they were taking a platoon or company worth of soldiers with them if need be, or some vehicles or some aircraft. I know they've been fielded. I know they've been floated, there you go. But I have no idea what the value is of these things, whether the Navy is employing them well, whether we're seeing results. Any opinion?
Well, they are showing the flag up in the Arctic. They are showing the flag up in the Arctic. The naval base at Nanisivik was designed to support them. And like I said, it's a tragic waste. The contracting company that's building it has gone into receivership last year because they're bankrupt.
You're talking about the jetty.
But the jetty is only part of it. It's built on a zinc and lead mine.
Right.
So it's toxic. And it's only summer capable right now. So it's not the all season gas station they were hoping for. And so I don't have a lot of faith that it's going to be what Harper proclaimed 20 years ago when he said, we're going to build this. It's going to be a deep water port. It's going to be all singing, all dancing. And 20 years later, they're still looking.
Vessel, making any good use of it?
Just for showing the flag pretty much, because it can sail where we haven't been sailing. And it does say, look, we've got the flag on military vessels here. It's Canadian waters.
I think it was only good for 1 meter summer ice.
Yeah, yeah. But,
Bob, I have a question actually that comes out of some of these discussions that you've already had. Can you paint a picture of what you think a layered sensors network looks like in the Arctic in order to acquire information?
well, the answer's already been given. Like satellites are necessary, both for communications to and from, and radar sat to actually see what's down there, down to a SOSUS system underneath, if you can protect it from icebergs, like being down at sea level. As well, human intelligence. We're getting a lot of work out of the local communities because they live there and they're seeing shipping go by that we didn't know about. And again, it's more than just the rangers. These are actually people who live in the community and they're getting paid. They get extra access to supplies when they come in the summer during the shopping season. So just for helping the government. So the layers are several deep. And what we need though is expertise to assess that information that's coming in. We don't have enough people that have lived in the Arctic that say, I remember this from something before. And I mean, it's not Petawawa in February, but.
So where would this information go? I understand the theoretical perspective. It would go to an intelligence collection center of some kind to be analyzed. But the reality is there a geographical center that this could all be connected to?
Well, I would think it would go through the operational centers like Halifax and there, because they have intelligence people there. NDHQ would insist on having its fingers in the pot somehow, but it would also go through the three capitals of the provinces and territories up there because they have a vested interest in their security. So rather than just stovepipes, it would be shared, hopefully.
Oh, all right. We have no more questions. You couldn't have done that while I was on that side of the room. I was too quick for you.
Just getting back to the ships, there are also a few, I believe, one Polar 2 icebreaker being built for the Coast Guard, and then there's the US, Finnish, Canadian agreement to build icebreakers. Do you have a particular view on whether that will?
Yeah, they're higher quality than the ones we have now that are aging out because they are more advanced technologically. But again, it's a time issue. I don't even know what the timelines are for forecast slippage into the sea, but I know that there are several projects on the work at various stages. And I believe they're all going to the Coast Guard, which, as mentioned, is part of the BND now. So.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Brian, any questions online? Well, in that case, we're a few minutes before 1300. Now, I hope we can prevail on Dr. Martyn because there's still leftovers, so I'm pretty sure he's going to hang around for a bit. If you feel free to come down and talk to me, he's pretty approachable, and ask any other questions that you felt you couldn't ask publicly. I would like to thank on behalf of the Center for International Defense Policy, Dr. Martyn for coming and sharing his expertise with us today. I think that what we heard today was perspective aligned with how many of us see the gaps in our defense and security coverage in the North. And it is somewhat, as we've said, depressing to hear some of this articulated out loud in one coherent presentation. But Dr. Martyn has also proposed a way ahead, which actually seems achievable. If we resource it, program it, and do all the things that we're articulating, we will try to do at a governmental level. So on your behalf, I'd like to thank Dr. Martyn for being here with us today.